We will see soon whether the RBA will lift interest rates once again. A lot of debate going around as to whether they should. The bump in monthly inflation data, the wages decision last week. So let's get the views of Nationals MP Keith Pitt, who joins me live now. Thanks very much for your time. It's looking at an increased chance, at least, if there's not a rate rise today. The RBA's basically said there are more to come. Do you fear this tips us into recession at some point?
Tom, what worries me is that Jim Chalmers will emulate his hero Paul Keating. We'll see again the recession that Australia apparently had to have. And we've seen very large increases in wages. And everyone that's earning minimum wage, of course they want an increase and they deserve it where they work hard. But the reality is straightforward. We saw Senate estimates last week put up evidence that real wages have gone backwards by 3%. And that's because the cost of everything is so expensive, mate. It's really, really hard out there.
When the coalition's talking about what Labor's done since it's come to office, can you identify the policies Labor's put in place that are contributing to inflation that the coalition opposes?
Sure. Well, there's a very simple one. They've just increased the cost of diesel fuel for heavy vehicles by 6 cents a litre. That can have no other impact than to increase the cost of just about everything, particularly groceries. Anything that's delivered by a heavy vehicle now costs more to get there. There are no other options but to increase prices, and of course that has to add into inflation. And we did see the monthly inflation rate jump again, up to almost 7%. They've got to get this under control.
So is that it though, that one measure?
Well, you asked me for one. It's a pretty big one. It's $1 billion plus in savings, and it impacts almost everything that every Australian has to buy. Of course it will drive up inflation.
Well, but not much at $1 billion when you're talking about the size of the economy. But I'm saying when you say this is all Labor's fault, they've done inflationary budgets, I'm just asking, is that it in terms of clear policies that increase inflation the coalition opposes? Is it just the diesel hike?
Well, two things. There's an increase in expenditure of $185 billion above where it was. They've had massive inflows from greater tax takes and particularly from the resources sector, which has had an extraordinary year, absolutely extraordinary. But if you are driving up the price for fuel, then you are driving up the price of everyday grocery items, whether that be a loaf of bread, through to nappies, through to everything else.
But what's another policy?
Oh, mate, well, there are any number of Labor policies which will continue to drive inflation. Now, Anthony Albanese has said that he wants wages to increase with inflation. Well, here's one right now. The Prime Minister said, before he became Prime Minister, that he wants wages to increase with inflation. Now, everyone knows that is dangerous because you'll get into a spiral where wages continue to increase, your dollar is worth less. Every single dollar that every Australian has in the bank right now that they had in the bank a year ago is worth less than it was.
Okay, but that's not a policy that Labor's enacted, that's a statement. That's a statement. And the only policy they've done on IR comes into effect today, so that's had precisely zero impact on inflation, hasn't it?
Yeah, but these are the contributions that they've made to the Fair Work Commission on the wages review. That is their statements, it's what they asked for. I've seen Minister Burke make his comments and sell it. Yeah,
but a couple of things on that. They didn't get it, and that increase on wages is below inflation. So he might have said keep pace with inflation, but it didn't.
Well, not for the minimum wage. It was over 8%. And you have the average on inflation at around 7%. So that is clearly above the inflation rate.
For the 180,000 workers, but out of a pool of 11 million or so.
Yeah, that's right.
Again, not a huge contributor.
Tom, all of these things are factors that add in. It's a very delicate balance to try and maintain. I think it's more likely than not that the Reserve Bank will increase rates today, but we'll soon see. It's a couple of hours away.
We will. Look, we like a prediction, so we'll note yours. I happen to have made the same one, so I can't criticise you for that. What about the Fair Work Commission and that decision on the award minimum wage? Let's just put aside the 180,000 people on that higher one. It was a bit of a complicated one-off. But are you saying they went too high at 5.75%?
Well, they've got more access to more data than I have, Tom. I think that's pretty obvious. And they'll continue to make those decisions. But they are influenced by government. They are influenced by the submissions that are put in by the minister. They look at what's happening across the economy. And as I've said, real wages have gone backwards. So, of course, people need more money in order to live. It's a really difficult time.
It just sounds like you're having a bit each way there. You're saying real wages have gone backwards, but that maybe Labor talking about wages needing to go up has contributed to inflation. So what is it on that 5.75%? What's your view on it?
Well, they've made a decision. It's not up to me. I'm not in government. I've got no influence on the Fair Work Commission, and I'm happy to make further comment. If you look at what is happening out in the real world,
what's your further comment on that figure, though? Is that going to be inflationary, do you think?
Well, we'll find out. When the inflation numbers come out, we will know exactly what's happening across the economy. But the people that I'm talking to in business, I mean, I've had reports where they've had up to 50% reductions in turnover. Now, that is an incredible impact for any business. I don't know many that can survive when they lose that much of their turnover. It's not profit. It's just pure turnover into the business. That means they can't afford to continue to pay for all the staff they have on board. You have impacts now with increases in wages for those where it applies. And you've got the cost of fuel, for example, going up to get everything delivered into their shop. Of course it will increase costs. But it is the government that said that they'll keep these things down. It is Labor that said those commitments and made those promises.
Just finally, the Pacific Island Australia Labor Mobility Scheme. It's a mouthful. It's known as PALM. I'll use that from now on. Labor's pushing for this to have a minimum of 30 hours per week. That is, businesses would have to employ these people for at least 30 hours a week. Is there an issue with that? Some of the farming groups think there is.
Tom, agriculture is very different to a 9-to-5 job in a bank or working at the front of a shop. When the crop is ready to pick, it's ready to pick. If the paddock is wet and you can't get on it, well, you can't get on it. And when it's time to get the crop off, it's time to get the crop off. And it depends on what it is. I mean, if it's sweet potatoes, sure, you can hand pick in the wet just to meet your contracts. But if it's long-term, like citrus over a period of time, it's very different. And the reason that they use a lot of backpackers in particular is because of the flexibility. You know, at times they have a great big surge in workforce demand. You know, these are difficult challenges to deal with. But what I'm worried about...
But isn't it difficult for the workers too? If you're coming to Australia, you want some certainty around how much you're going to be able to work?
Tom, this scheme has worked successfully for many, many years. I know a lot of farmers who have had long-term relationships with people from the Pacific who have come to their business for years. They look after them, they treat them well, they pay them well, and they're great employees. Not every farmer out there is a bad seed. There are some challenges in places, as we've seen across other sectors. But what concerns me is that Labor's changes will mean that they simply won't employ them. And I think that's bad for our relationship with the Pacific, and particularly for those who are trying to just send a few dollars home.
All right. Keith Pitt, thank you for your time today.
Great to be with you.